Hello everyone, welcome back to Politically Challenged, the show that brings you analysis and commentary on today's top stories across the political spectrum. I'm Mason Devers along with Micca Terrell, Christenson, and Amber Kent, and this is Politically Challenged. Tonight we come to you with a story that I'm sure all news stations across the nation and the world are covering. Christian?
Well, the Las Vegas and gun control are certainly two things that we've heard about a lot in the news recently. And on the evening of October 1st, a lone gunman opened fire into a country music festival. The shooting was said to have lasted at least 15 minutes, leaving 59 people dead and more than 500 injured. The shooter fired from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel into the festival that was on the Las Vegas Strip. Before he was apprehended by police, the suspect shot and killed himself in his hotel room after the officers opened fire on him as well. Cities and towns across the country, including Nashville, have come together holding vigils in grief as what is being called the largest mass shooting in our country's history. Well, guys, to begin this one, there's no doubt that this was obviously a tragic event, and I understand that there are some major issues surrounding it, but to begin with, we do give our condolences, there's no doubt about that. We are certainly thinking of all the families. Prayers are being sent your way, and that's from all of us here at APSU-TV. But that being said, there are a lot of struggling issues with this as well. And the first one starts with gun control. And that's where I want to begin with Micca, because the issue of gun control is something that is talked about seemingly daily in this country, whether it's on the news or just between politicians. And I want your perspective on whether or not more gun laws could have stopped this from happening.
Well, I think that yes, we need to improve the enforcement of the laws that we have. We need specifically, I think, when it comes to mental health screening and issues, that there definitely needs to be some improvement. I understand we have obviously to balance that out with the privacy of our citizens, but I think when it comes to the safety overall, I think we need to give a little bit and make sure that people who do have mental health issues are screened more thoroughly before getting a gun or being licensed to carry a weapon. And then I think too, when it comes to buying weapons too, there needs probably, I think maybe longer periods to wait would help as well. Those are just a couple of things I think that would help improve what we have already on the books.
Yeah. And there are many states already that some do a 3-day period, some do a week-long period, that from your background check, in order to buy, and depending on the gun too, if it's an assault rifle, if it's a handgun, it just changes depending on those laws. But now Mason, for you, a little bit different angle here. The shooter was said to be in possession of 19 firearms. Now we've heard from multiple different media spectrums, some say 17, some 18, others 19, said to have explosives and thousands of rounds of ammunition. Is the access to that kind of firepower safe for our community?
I think this kind of goes to what Micah was saying earlier, in that we have lots of firearm, explosive laws on the books that are constantly debated between both sides of the aisle, including the NRA getting in the mix as well. One thing for me, and I'm not sure that this is where he got his weapons, but I think one thing that really needs to be addressed is how people are buying weapons at gun shows that are hosted across the country. I think these need to be more regulated and more background checks done at them, because I know at a lot of the gun shows there aren't background checks that have to be completed, and so that's how people can obtain some of these weapons.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Well, and lastly, the most because I'll throw in my 2 cents here shortly, but I guess we'll go to you, Amber, because this is a good question as well for all of you, and I want to hear from you first, and then we'll move throughout the table. But the Second Amendment is constantly talked about, and it's actually a topic that really gets people on edge. So I want to know how you interpret the Second Amendment, because on a personal stance, everybody sees it differently. So how do you see it?
On a personal stance, I feel that the Second Amendment is an important law that we have, and it's something that we need to continue to have. However, when it was written, when our Bill of Rights was written, we had no idea. We, as in, like I was there, but more of the Founding Fathers had no idea that we would have any kind of weaponry this large. The fact of the matter is, we have grown as an industrial society more than anyone could have imagined. The fact that we have this kind of weaponry needs to be addressed. And the fact that so many people can have access to this, like Mason was saying, and gun shows in different places that maybe a background check doesn't happen, is something we need to look at. And the interpretation of the Second Amendment, you know, we have the right to have guns, but that doesn't mean we have the right to have these mass, you know, giant amounts of ammunition, these large, you know, assault rifles that can cause so much devastation.
Okay, well, as someone who may possibly be an owner and may possibly know some owners of some certain weaponry, I do want to throw this position at you as well. There are more guns than people in this country, and it is a multiplier of many, in which I haven't seen the statistic recently, but it's gone up so rapidly that it's hard to keep track of. And I want to compare it to different things. You can compare it to drugs, you can compare it to just about anything, but once it becomes illegal, does that stop it with assault rifles?
No, it doesn't. And that's where I think a lot of problems are going to stem from, is because we have this war on drugs still that has been in place since Ronald Reagan. And this war on drugs has, you know, caused more problems than it has helped anything, at least what it seems like. And what we're going to start seeing, I fear, is a war on guns. And it's going to cause the same problems that we've had on the war on drugs. It's going to make it so that the black market of these weapons is larger, because we already have a horrible black market, like Micah was saying, over these kind of weaponry. And what we're going to end up seeing, with that many fear, is that it's going to continue to rise, and that we're going to see, you know, these numbers continue to rise no matter what laws are put into place. So I feel like banning these weapons isn't going to help in any situation, because like telling a child that they can't have the candy, they're going to go and try to get the candy. You're not going to be able to stop that. But if we have higher regulations, if we have more, you know, a harder way of getting these things, maybe a test in place, things like that, things that are, you know, reasonably placed, then you have a whole other situation.
Yeah, and what seems to be almost impossible to solve, especially with this case, is that it's hard to find anything on him that would have kept him from purchasing it in the first place. They have struggled to find any information. Nothing has been confirmed that he was in the mindset to not own a weapon, to do what he even thought about doing. So it's nearly impossible to predict and figure out how we can fix this.
I mean, legally, it sounds like he's just a retired accountant. He had a lot of money. He liked guns. And how many of us know people who like guns? I mean, and obviously, again, we mentioned the Second Amendment. We have the right to defend our castle. We have the right to defend our home. We need to keep that right. We don't need, you know, anybody to say, okay, we need to outlaw this type of weapon because, you know, some, you know, person who didn't have all their mental faculties in check, or we don't really know about his mental faculties yet. But from all indications from, again, family who hadn't seen him in a while, they thought he was fine, but we have to think about that. So again, I feel like there's so many questions, and that's the thing I want to make sure we mention about mass shootings are so complex. We try to simplify it with, okay, there's this person who is, you know, the one sheriff even said, I can't get in the mind of a psychopath. We don't know if he's a psychopath or not.
Right.
We don't know. We don't know about his girlfriend, fiance, whatever. We don't know. I mean, there's just so much that's unanswered, but we can look at what has happened, and we can look at what laws we do have and try to make it better, where we have better safeties in place for people who want to go to a big concert, who want to go somewhere to be safe.
Yeah, and well, just because I do want to hear from you as well, but before we get to that, here's something that honestly, in the past year, even 2 years, our expectations of politicians have gone way down, and that's on a personal level, not just what they can bring us in laws, but on a personal level. And with this situation, and I want to open it up, how do you feel politicians handled this? Did they use it too much to their favor? Did they skip past the sentiment and use it too much to their favor?
Well, let me comment on something that Micah said, and then I'll get to your point, Christian. I think one thing, up until the Las Vegas shooting, one common denominator within a lot of the mass shootings that have been going on, not only in the U.S. but around the world, is that the majority of the shooters have had mental health issues. And so that's one thing that I think we need to do with our background checks, and as a country, offering people better health care for their mental health. But also, like she brought up, mass shootings are complex. And I think what's frustrating a lot of people with this one is it's not checking the normal boxes like it usually does.
Absolutely.
You know? He wasn't super active on social media, you know, with radical posts or anything like that. As they've talked to his family members, he wasn't a huge religious person, not politically active. Many of his neighbors, they've got comments from them just saying that he was real standoffish and just kind of quiet into himself. So there's a lot of unknown facts that the authorities just don't know, or at least have not released yet. So it's going to be interesting in the coming days and coming weeks how this story is going to develop. But going off of what you said as far as how politicians and the political world has handled the issue, many on the left came out super soon politicizing this, and I felt like that they should have taken at least the first 12 hours, maybe even 24 hours to let our nation mourn, let the families mourn, and come together. These past 2 weeks in our nation have just been super divisive, just with the NFL thing and things going on in Puerto Rico. And so I think this is an opportunity for our nation to reunite and come together and get behind Las Vegas.
Yeah, it's really tough because now, a lot of times we look back on 9/11, we get those moments of silence, those different ideas that really bring people together. But with this situation, it was immediately divisive, and that's really too bad to see that has fallen the way that it has. But Micah, our next topic kind of plays right into this one.
It does actually.
So let's hear what you've got there.
Right. So it's a Sunday service not too long ago, just over a week ago, really came to a horrible, violent end with bullets flying everywhere. It was at a small church in Antioch, not far from here, not even an hour. Investigators are still trying to figure out what happened at the church there, but we do know that police have charged the suspected gunman, Emmanuel Sampson, and hopefully that we'll figure out more in the coming days what happened there at Burnett Chapel Church of Christ. We do know that according to the Associated Press, that there was a note found which allegedly refers to retaliation, revenge, against the shooting that was carried out a few years ago in South Carolina at one of the oldest African American churches in our nation, where the suspect there, Dylan Roof, he opened fire and killed 9 people. And so we're hearing that the suspect, Sampson, that he saw what happened and apparently may have felt revenge and had to do sort of a reverse Dylan Roof, if you will, with this case. So. But we had the usher who was there at the church who basically held the man at bay until police arrived. He had a gun in his car.
Yes, he did.
So we think about gun control again, where this was protecting a church. So it was important to have that there. So let's take a little bit a closer look at this case for us now. Federal investigators are looking at it as a civil rights case because these people were obviously worshiping, trying to celebrate their faith when they were brutally attacked. So we need to talk about Sampson, who apparently he immigrated. He's not born in the United States citizen. He came to America from Sudan in the 1990s and has been here. Would we want to call him a Christian terrorist? Because he went to this church for a while. He apparently went there a couple of years and then had some sort of change of heart. It happened where he just turn on these people. We don't know if it was, what ideology got him or whatever, but apparently there's some really cryptic Facebook messages and things that he posted. He was vegan weightlifting, apparently as well. So what do you think, Mason, about what we know about this shooter? Do you think of him as a Christian terrorist?
I don't, and the FBI and investigators have not indicated any type of relation to ISIS or any kind of Middle Eastern terrorist group. I think this really boils down to how divided we are as a nation when it comes to race. And like you said, he had a note that was talking about getting revenge for the shooting that happened at the African American church in South Carolina a year or two ago. And what I find interesting about this is that the media has not really covered this as much as other shootings at churches or mass shootings, for a matter of fact. And I think a lot of it plays into that, the races were reversed here. And also with the usher that had the firearm there, it's kind of a pro-Second Amendment story, and so a lot of the media hasn't really covered it. I think I saw a study that said, I think all the major networks gave it about 30 minutes of coverage.
Well, Mason,
total.
I have to kind of disagree on you there a little bit, because I first heard of this story, I first saw that it was happening from Fox News. it came through as a push notification on my phone. I'm one of those people that have about 15 different news sources that give me different notifications every hour. And I learned from it about the order of Fox News, and then News 4 in Nashville, then CNN, and then BBC News. So they all gave me this coverage, and it might not have been on their televised way that they do it on their 24/7 coverage that CNN and Fox both do, but I did receive that coverage from at least a mobile standpoint.
Well, and that's what I'm talking about. I mean, if you look at the network coverage on TV, it was significantly given less compared to other stories that, in my opinion, were not as relevant. Yeah. And I feel that it's just because it doesn't play into the left's message as much.
Is it that it doesn't play as much into the message, or is that these shootings have become more of a national thing that we just accept that happen now? I mean, we accept these shootings that happen more. We are in a more violent country, it seems like. This is something that's, normalized.
I'd say that we've become a little numb to a point. Mm-hmm. To a point, absolutely we have. Because when you get used to seeing something as often as we do, especially when you hear about places like Chicago or Detroit, it's different. But it's no different in terms of the importance of life, but it's different because of how often it actually happens. But what he's saying about the news, although you had the notifications, I got them as well, but I did not see it for a very significant amount of time. It was very short, and it was as if, okay, here it is, we covered it, check, let's move on.
Right.
And the reason I say that is because just like he's saying, the usher was considered the hero of the story. And because he was the hero, he actually ran out to his truck. It's not like he carried the gun in church, but if he had, could have saved the life that was lost, but multiple people were shot. When he came back in and the usher held the man at gunpoint till police arrived, it goes to show that there is a flip side to that, and I do think that the left politically was very upset about that. They would have had a huge story had he have shot up the church and then shot himself. But he was held at gunpoint by another man who used his Second Amendment right to stop it from getting any worse. And I think that's where the leftist media is really upset.
I agree, and that was my next question about, I wanted to kind of segue in about churches stepping up security. It seems like a lot more, I was reading just before we started, about several hundred churches have reached out to various security companies trying to get more information on how to, have armed guards at their churches. Meanwhile, though, there were some churches already in Nashville who were like, wait a minute, we've had this for years. Yeah. We've had this for years. So It's not like it's a new thing, right?
I can kind of speak to that. What's actually ironic is I was actually at church when the story broke of the shooting. And I go to Life Point Church here in Clarksville, and I would say our attendance is probably pretty close to about 4,000 every Sunday. So, I mean, we have a pretty good-sized church, and we do have a security team. We have local sheriff's officers at church every Sunday, but I actually work on the production team at church, and so I was talking with our lights guy, and he said that he has a setting on the lights board, an active shooter setting, that sends the high beam light straight down the aisles to potentially blind a shooter that might be in the sanctuary. So our church has done very well in developing a plan for an active shooter situation.
It's so sad. It's sickening.
Yes,
it is.
That's
It's
exactly
the fact that there has to be any kind of security in a church. I mean, really anywhere, but like specifically a church, because although yes, it is another largely crowded area, like concerts, places like that. You've got the mega churches as well. It's sad to think that a place where the golden rule is set in stone, such as treat others the way you want to be treated, that is a place of danger as well. You can't be at peace, really anywhere, and that's why I think people can't live in fear. People say, I will never go to a country music festival again. I'll never go to any music festival again. I will never get on an airplane again. Well, that's for people who live in that, and for people who have dealt with certain things, I understand to a point. But living in fear, I want to say, it would stress me out more than actually saying, you know what, if today's my day, then, well, that's about it. So
definitely. Now let's touch on mental health issues again, because again, what little we know about the suspect, Mr. Sampson, we just know that, he hasn't got an extensive police record. We know that he did have an issue where he did threaten his life. He did have a domestic violence call a couple of times with his girlfriend. So again, we don't know a lot about what this person, what he really is. And so obviously we'll probably learn more. But again, to touch on mental health issues, and I know you talked about it a little bit, Mason, but I just feel like our mental health system is really failing people who are accused and who may have reached out for help. It sounds like he reached out for help. He needed help. He was feeling like he needed to take his life. And then this happened. So what do we need to do?
I feel like this is going to touch on to a subject that a lot of people have a problem with, and that is our health system in this country. And it's failing us.
Absolutely.
It's failing every single one of the citizens. And people can say that our politicians are the ones that are failing us because of gun laws and because of gun rights and everything like under the sun. But it comes down to the point of these people, he reached out for help. And he obviously did not get the help that he needed. Dylan Roof reached out for help. He did not get the help that he needed. And people are dead because of that. People are dead because these two gentlemen did not have the mental facilities to not kill somebody else. Our country is failing us in general because we are not here for them in the way that we need to be. As a healthcare system, we're not there helping.
Well, we could take that into veterans. We could take that
exactly.
into
No,
just about
but that's
everything.
completely correct. We have veterans dying every single day because they're not getting the help they need.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something that President Trump has talked about a lot. Do we know how much he's going to be able to push through? No, that's still in the works. I've seen multiple videos with Paul Ryan showing how many things that they've passed in the House that they just can't get through Congress. And I get where there's differences there, but they're really struggling to get anything to go all the way through. So the question is, will anybody sit back and agree, or will they always be at gridlock? And
I honestly am afraid it'll be gridlock.
I'm afraid
I mean,
in our lifetime, I think.
Well,
I think
because think about it, big pharma. I mean, the big drug companies, they have everyone by the purse strings. They honestly do. And I mean, I don't want to be rude here, but people, and then we have, people want their drugs. People want to be high. They want their drugs. We have a huge opioid problem. And it's a huge endless cycle. And I don't have all the answers, but I feel like a lot of it goes back to these drug companies and the FDA who says, oh yeah, let's go ahead and push that drug through. It's fine, no worries. People have some side effects. It's no big deal. But it obviously is a big deal.
Big pharma is a big problem in this country.
Yeah.
And I think that's a whole other issue that we could talk about for probably a few hours.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, just as everything. But we've definitely got more. And in terms of campus safety, we're gonna. I guess we could stick to the gun talk as well, and we won't make this one as long. But I mean, considering campus safety is pretty important. I know we could take this many different directions, but this was something we could go much more in depth to because as we look at different shootings, whether it was Sandy Hook Elementary in 2012, Virginia Tech in 2007, and all the way back to the University of Texas and Austin not too long ago, in 1966. Here at Austin Peay, we haven't necessarily dealt with anything like that, at least since we've been around.
Thankfully.
Thankfully, absolutely.
A couple close calls.
But a question here now, Amber. I want to go to you first because this really has me curious. Do you think it would be safer, although we have campus police, city police strolls through as well, but although we have campus police, do you think we would be safer if we allowed students to carry weapons legally on campus?
This is a very interesting topic, in my opinion, because Tennessee just recently passed a law making all universities a public space. So the fact that guns are still not allowed on campuses kind of surprised me a little bit, just based on the fact that this is now a public area. However, I do not feel that other students should have guns on campus, and I know that might disappoint you a little bit, Christian, but my reason behind that is I really don't trust my peers.
Yeah.
And that sounds very rude, and I'm not trying to mean it to be that way, but what I mean to say is we are still a group of some people who are 17 to about 21 who are still growing and maturing as human beings.
Well, let me pause you right there because if this did become a law, like it would have to go to the point where they would have to be 21 because in the state of Tennessee, in order to legally carry a handgun, you do have to be 21 years old. You'd have to go to an 8-hour class You'd have to shoot, have multiple background checks, and take written tests. So those are just a few of the requirements.
So those would be the requirements
Yes,
in place.
yes.
Okay,
And,
I obviously don't know enough
and
of
so,
this topic.
Oh no, and that's okay. That's okay. But it would have to be something that it would have to be legal by the state of Tennessee's legal carry rights.
Okay.
My biggest thing with it is when we're talking about an active shooter on campus. The active shooter does not call campus police and say, hey, if you wouldn't mind meeting me here, I'm just going to go ahead and take a few shots and then you can get me. But it's going to happen unexpectedly, and it always has. It's never happened expectedly. So in these situations, I know for myself personally, I am allowed to have it on anywhere in Clarksville except for places who have the specific, the laws and everything like that posted on their front doors, and including banks, movie theaters, and government places like that. But we're talking about a campus here where there are multiple buildings and hundreds of different areas that things could go wrong. In that situation, I don't feel we have enough campus police around.
Well, we do have full-time staff who do carry.
There are a few.
Yeah.
There are a few. I think
few.
there are approximately
Absolutely.
30,
Absolutely.
according to the campus police statistics, that do carry, and obviously have to register with the campus police department in order to do so. But you do bring up a good point. What if students were able to do so? I'm kind of worried. I mean, I don't know. I mean, to me, I feel like Amber a little bit. I'm kind of concerned about, those who, might be a little bit younger. But still, if they were 21, they completed their training, they were licensed to carry legally. I mean, it might make me feel better to know that, but again, in my position, teaching as an adjunct and maybe knowing that some of my students might be carrying, that might make me feel a little worried.
A little on edge.
A little on edge
I
because,
understand.
that would happen. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, then, if something did happen where we had a stranger come on campus
And
do
it would be a
something.
conceal. It would not be an open
Right.
carry. So, you wouldn't actually physically see it. But yes, I understand what you
And
mean.
one thing with this too is with those guidelines that you put into place, I can honestly say that I was in the wrong with what I was at first saying. But the only thing I would still be concerned about is if there was an active shooter and then we did have students that were trying to hold this active shooter off, how could the police officers differentiate between these two people?
Absolutely.
And that would be something that could be a problem, is if that was happening. I mean, how do you tell who was terrorizing other students and who was
And I've
trying
actually
to
thought,
help?
I'm not going to lie, I've thought about that multiple times. And we could talk about it in just about any circumstance, whether it's an undercover cop in a grocery store where a man who's legally carrying his weapon pulls one out because he sees a robbery, and then the undercover cop may not know and may go after the man who's trying to help. That's a matter of time and place, and it's just one of those you hope doesn't go wrong. So that's tough.
I'm kind of 50-50 like you, Micah, on the
Yeah.
situations. First with the students, just because, and I mean, this kind of ties in with the faculty carrying as well. I think we can all understand that being in college, either as a professor or as a student, can be a high-stress environment at times.
Oh, definitely.
Especially for professors that are possibly on tenure track. They're up late at night doing research for their dissertation and stuff like that. Students are up late at night writing essays, and so sometimes that can affect your mental stability and your stress level. We do have the unique opportunity to have a high military presence or retired military presence on our campus.
Sure.
I think that can be beneficial and at the same time not. Some of our veterans suffer from PTSD, which could be potentially detrimental if they had a handgun.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think you kind of have to look at both sides of it. And another thing that we'll talk about is that students are not allowed to carry pepper spray on campus, but faculty members are allowed to carry handguns. I'm on the Student Government Association, and this is one big thing that we talked about last semester in several of our meetings. And we actually sent a letter to the president of the university, Police Chief Cassets, and actually forwarded the letter on to this Tennessee State Legislature. And honestly would like to see the state legislature, because it is a state law banning pepper spray on college campuses.
And hopefully we do see change. But that being said, we are getting close to time. So we are going to send it to a quick break, and we will be right back here on Politically Challenged.